You've got to develop thick skin. Working in an early stage business is pretty stressful.
Varun Bhanot.
Varun Bhanot, co-founder of Magic AI, the UK's first AI personal trainer.
Some people die at 25 but aren't buried till they're 85. We've got about 300 different exercises that track people. We want to scale that to 3,000. We want to bring on more athletes and more content creators on our platform. And I think what's really important is having a very strong support network. You sometimes find the best ideas in places you didn't initially think you'd find them. If you're successful, that's great, but it may not be that way forever. Yeah. But equally, if you fail, that's obviously awful, but also remember that's not going to be there forever either.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming here in this wonderful place, Bridges. Really excited to be here. This is the first time I'm here as well, and we're here, and I think it's nice and cozy, and it's really, really British. And great to have Varun here, and Varun Bhanot, the founder of Magic AI, or magic.fit, on social media. He's done some wonderful things through non-profit projects, and also Hubble, which he's exited now as well. So I just want to jump in there and tell us a little bit about yourself, your early life, school life, college, university. What makes you who you are prior?
I'll try and say what I'm allowed to say about my school life, and whatever won't get me into trouble. But yeah, I'm from East London, border of Essex and East. Was born there, still live there. I think anyone who comes from that part of town, often, particularly my peer group who grew up in Ilford, there's a general determination to do well, to strive, to try and overcome, and I think that's sort of somewhat part of my story as well. And I guess that's what also made me think about entrepreneurship in the early days as well.
Nice. So a lot of we do have a lot of entrepreneurs here. So when you go through that kind of journey of going to the conventional side, going to school, and you think you're going to study, you're going to finish, you're going to get a great job, you're doing internship first and stuff. So where did the entrepreneurial mindset start from? When did you start? Did you sell sweets at school, which a lot of people do? Or
a lot of people do. Actually, I studied law, university just down the road from here, which is definitely not an entrepreneurial path at all. And it was, for me, it actually came much later in life. It was, I went into, graduated, went into a corporate job working it was actually a legal role within an investment bank. And with each milestone in life, right, like you do your exams in school, and then you jump to do your A-levels, then you try and get into uni, and then you pass uni and you try and get your job. So for me, I was just jumping from milestone to milestone. And then I think when I got to that final job, sort of sitting there in this bank, I was thinking, wow, this is it. Everything I've worked for is now for this. And I'm basically just sitting at a wooden desk, a bit like this. And I remember thinking to myself, is this all life's going to be now? I'm sitting in this very kind of monotonous, pushing paper all day, it's this box kind of office. And I was like, is all of the last sort of 10 years of jumping through milestones and trying to achieve all these things, is this all it's going to be? And I think that's really what got me thinking about another route, another path. Now, when I was at university, which was about almost 15 years ago, there was no such thing as, people never really talked about entrepreneurship. They never talked about tech, and there was no tech society. There was no startup society. No one knew when you say startup to someone, they'll for mean you're just starting like a chocolate brand or something, which by the way is great if that's what you're doing. But what I mean is there was never any kind of discussion about growing a huge venture and doing that as an actual profession and a job. And I sort of went through my own journey to discover that. So after a year of working in that bank, I just left, went cold turkey, had no real plan, and ended up getting a job as an unpaid intern at a tech startup here back in beginning of 2014. Exactly 10 years actually this month. Nice. And that sort of led me on the path. That was Hubble, and that was the path that I'm on sort of now, I guess.
Nice. And just going into Hubble a little bit more, you exited from Hubble, you were the first employee at Hubble. And then you really got into the team. So, you were part of the founding team. So tell me a little bit how that went. In terms of exiting the business, what that journey was, some obstacles through that as well. So
for those who don't know, Hubble is a bit like Airbnb, but for office space. And yeah, been around for almost 10 years, which is actually quite crazy to think about. I joined as the first employee, so they hadn't raised any money. They were part of an accelerator at the time called Entrepreneur First, and that accelerator was only just getting off the ground themselves. So I joined in, and I wanted to get into the world of tech and startups, but I had no idea like how to do it, and I had no real skill set either. I had a law degree, which is not that useful for if you want to start work in an entrepreneurial startup environment. So I said to the two founders, it was just the two founders at the time, I said, I'll work for free, but I just want to learn from you guys. And obviously no one's going to say no to free labor. I think there's laws against it now, but 10 years ago, you could do an unpaid internship and it was fine. And by the way, because I was only 22, I think, I didn't really have a huge amount of overhead in my life. No mortgage, no kids. I was still living actually with my parents. So it wasn't like I could kind of afford to do that. So I worked for about 6 months and they ended up getting funded, initial round of sort of seed funding. And then I got a job with them. They said, okay, here's a job now. You know, you've proved yourself. They gave me equity share options in the company. And that was really how I got into the world of startups. I guess you could call it hustled my way in.
Nice. And I think it's quite important that people, especially students, understand that journey, right? And working, it's not always about payment. And I think getting that experience is super, super important. And then that led you on to, and just before I go on to that, I just want to jump back a little bit. You also did a master's after your law degree, right?
A few years later, not straight away, but a few years after, I did a postgraduate as well, yeah.
Okay, fine. And then when you went through that experience with Hubble, was it after Hubble or?
It was during.
Okay.
Yeah, sort of like
Why
part-time.
did you choose that path?
So again, it's a bit like what I was saying earlier about when I was at uni, there was never any entrepreneurship type course, or there was never really like a club or society you could join to learn these things. So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, the only way to really learn about this is to go to uni, go to do a degree or some sort of postgrad. A lot of people do MBAs. They go to a business school and do an MBA. So I went to Cambridge. I did a postgraduate there. And the thing is when I finished that course, it took about a year. I think it was a year and a half to do. By the time I'd finished it, I'd realized that I'd actually learned more by actually working in a company, in a startup, than actually sitting there learning from the books and doing the exams. And I actually spoke to a number of people who had a similar type of experience, and that's when I realized, and this is just some advice if you are thinking of going to business school, is that often business schools are not really set up to teach you about business or entrepreneurship. They're set up to teach you management. So if you wanted to go into a corporate company and work as a manager, perhaps a management consultant or venture capital or whatever it might be, that's typically why you should go there. But a lot of our lecturers who were teaching us about entrepreneurship, they had holes in their shoes. They had never started a business in their life, and there's no compromise. There's no substitution, for working in an entrepreneurial environment. That's where you basically learn everything.
Yeah, exactly. Totally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And I think. So then you also went on to non-profit as well, Unhoused. Tell me how that started.
Yeah, that was actually in more recent years, just last 3 or 4 years. I got engaged to my now wife, and she was very involved in diversity and social affairs at accounting firm she works at. And I obviously had a background in technology. So we wanted to do something to get like a project together, which we thought might be like a force for good, something we can contribute and give back, because as great as starting a business is, there's nothing more rewarding than trying to set up something to give back and reward other people. So we set up a non-for-profit called unhoused.org. That's the actual URL as well, unhoused.org. Every day we used to come in on the tube here and we used to see like homeless people just rough sleeping. And we thought it would be cool if there was a way we could develop some kind of tech platform that could help those people perhaps get better access to clothing, supplies, warm things. So we basically set up, it's quite simple actually, it's just an online shop. You can order supplies for yourself, whether it be woolly hats, jumpers, socks, gloves, vests, and for every one you buy for yourself, we donate one. So it's like a buy one, give one model. And the reason why we chose that model is because it self-funds itself. So unlike a charity where you always see people outside with their, like trying to take coins or they're trying to sign you up for something, so they're always trying to rely on goodwill, we wanted to start an actual enterprise that self-sustained itself. So that's what unhoused.org is. It's like essentially it's a business, but it runs itself because it's a non-for-profit. For every one you buy, we then donate one, and then the cycle goes around like that. And
do you think you would have come up with, started a non-profit if you were more on the corporate side?
Great question. I've got no idea what the answer is to that question. I'm sure there's lots of people who work in corporates who do great work as well, and I know lots of big corporates actually have actual designated initiatives to get people involved. So yeah, I don't think it makes necessarily a difference. Yeah.
Awesome, because a lot of entrepreneurs, they understand what value distribution is. So you get a lot of entrepreneurs where like to add value back because they get that, right? So
Right.
that's where a lot of non-profits come up. So in terms of going through that journey, what was the mindset shift like for you? So obviously studying law and then getting into the entrepreneurial world, what was that mindset shift in your mind and how did you kind of manage that? What was the pivotal moment?
When I was thinking about jumping ship,
Yeah.
so really, when I was sitting there in that box office I was telling you about, the first thing that came into my mind is this all my life's ever going to be? And then I also heard this quote, which I think is still stuck with me today, which is some people die at 25 but aren't buried till they're 85. And I think I was almost 25 at that point. And I was thinking, just so you know what that means, is that for a lot of people, they sort of give up on really aspiring to do anything meaningful with their life when they hit 25. So then they end up just coasting along. And I could feel I was slipping into that. So for me, starting something is a very creative endeavor with entrepreneurship. So that's why I felt like that's probably the best way of doing something meaningful. And so far it's been going well with what we've built with Magic, but it's also very stressful as well, which I have to emphasize. It's not a smooth, fun, loving path where we're sitting in the office counting money, then we go home and make TikToks about how great it is. It's not like that at all.
Yeah.
And I have to emphasize that.
And what was your fitness journey like?
Yeah, so when I was at Hubble, that very first company, that startup I worked at, I definitely let myself go a bit. I drank way too much whiskey, ate too many kebabs, and had a lot of bad habits basically left over from uni when I didn't really know anything about diet and nutrition and effectively exercise. And working in an early stage business is pretty stressful, so I never really paid attention to my health. And I was ballooning out of control. And a health professional said, you better make a big change soon or you may have future problems later on. And that's what got me thinking, I should probably hire a personal trainer. And by the way, I'd never set foot in a gym, had no idea what to do, found it too intimidating. I think they call it gym intimidation, which is an actual word now. And I worked with a personal trainer over about 4 months, ended up losing, I think it was about 25% of my body fat, 30, 40 kilos, did a cover shoot, all of these very cringeworthy things that I never thought I would be involved in. And going through that experience, which was amazing, I realized how old-fashioned the whole personal training process was. You sort of sit there, there's a man with a clipboard and pen just manually counting your reps and giving you verbal feedback. There's no data augmentation involved. You have to go to a physical place at a physical time, meet someone. It's very expensive, so here in London, around here, it will cost up to £50 to £100 an hour. So for most people, very inaccessible on a long-term basis. So I started to think about, could there be a way how we could automate this entire experience, but using perhaps a mixture of AI and some cool hardware in the home, and then we could essentially democratize access to this type of personalized training on a one-to-one. And that was basically the seed of the idea that led us to start building what we're building now.
Okay, cool. In 60 seconds, tell us about AI, what you know about AI, and where do you think AI is going to go?
So actually, I'll tell you the first thing is I didn't know very much about AI when we started this company. So this was about 2.5 years ago, before it was trendy, building this. And this is actually one of the points I want to mention, which is I think there's a lot of people out there who feel that they want to start a business in a certain space, but don't have the skill set to do it. They kind of don't let themselves go into something because they're worried that they may be too underqualified. And I also felt that. So for me, what I felt was the first thing I need to do is find someone that knows about AI, right? You want to start an AI company, that would help. So I actually ended up working with my co-founder. His name's Sunil. We actually worked previously in our old company, Hubble, together, which, by the way, is an amazing way to meet co-founders is from your previous job because you've worked with them before. It's actually a perfect way to figure out if working with on a business. And he's an amazing chief product manager. We hashed together a very rough prototype of our product. You can check it out on our website is magic.fit, F-I-T. You can see the product there. And we built a very rough prototype, which we then started demoing to investors. And that sort of got us on our way because we ended up raising our first round of investment, enabled us to then hire actual engineers to build the AI, build the company into what it is now.
What was the fundraising journey like?
So it was very difficult then. I think it's even harder now, and but then my conclusion is that it's never easy in any market. The first thing is you have to really know what your USP is of your product. What is it that you're really selling to people? Like, explain the problem, explain the solution, and how you're basically combating that, and what your value proposition is. I think the key thing is just making sure that you know who it is that you really want to bring on board. For us, a big mistake we made is we didn't know initially like who it was we really wanted to pitch to. We were pitched to big funds and small funds and angel investors, and we had an invitation at one point to go on Dragon's Den, and we didn't do it in the end. But we didn't really know what we were doing. So the first thing I'll say is try and find a mentor who can just teach you the route ahead to fundraise, because it's a very long, stressful process. You need to have lawyers in hand and accountants and make sure you forge your deal. But the key thing is whenever you go into that process, try and start on your best foot. So if you can spend maybe a year just building out your product, getting a waiting list, perhaps just getting 50 customers or 100 customers if possible, or even just 10, whatever it might be, wait till you've got to that stage before going to investors, because you want to always put your best foot forward when you go out there.
And just going back onto mentorship, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs who are starting up, they need mentorship. And I don't think single-handedly, as much as we would like to think that we can do it, it's not possible. So where did you find your mentor from? Did you go into communities? Did you go online?
Yeah, so community, I mean, even like a community like this one would be fantastic for finding a mentor. I actually reached out cold to a few people on LinkedIn and tried to sort of befriend them, and fortunately a few like well-experienced founders were willing to just give me a phone call. They're willing to give me, a 30-minute Zoom call, and they allowed me to like spar questions across email with them. That's really when I say mentorship, that's really what I mean. It's like not trying to take too much time off other people and just trying to sort of give and take with them like that. Another really good way, by the way, if there's a founder you really admire and perhaps they sell a product that's quite easy and accessible, I don't know whether they run like a supplements business or a food and drink business, great way is just to buy their product first, because it gives you a door to then message them and say, oh, by the way, I bought your product, it's really great, and I really enjoyed the taste, or I really liked how this worked for me. And whenever you message a founder or an entrepreneur and you yourself are already a customer of theirs, there is 100% chance they're going to reply to you, right? No entrepreneur is going to not reply to one of their customers. So a good way of, if there's a particular founder you've seen or you admire and you hear about them a lot on social media, perhaps a great way of just getting to know them is just become their customer, shoot them a cold email.
Who was your most influential mentor? Who comes to your mind when you think of mentorship?
So I have a few. One is a guy called Dan Murray-Serter, who founded a company called Heights, who in a tremendous, when I say supplements company, I'm thinking of his company because that's exactly what I did. I became a customer of his and then shot him an email saying, I really love your supplements. Have you considered like increasing the size of the box? Have you considered like doing this angle? Then he replied a couple of days later, oh, thanks so much for your feedback. That was really helpful. And then I think a few weeks after that, I shot him another email. Oh, by the way, I heard you angel invest and we've got a round open at the moment. Would you be keen?
Nice.
And he actually was, because, firstly, I was a customer of his, which was always a reason for him to reply. But also what I didn't realize is he also knew about 25 other founders who he ended up bringing into our raise. So he brought like the COO of Tough Mudder, the ex-head of product from Spotify. We had one of the head of products from Meta come in. So we ended up having this tremendous list of angels just off of that one interaction that I had. So yeah, you never know where a cold email can take you sometimes, especially if you say you're a customer to start off with. And so often it's about give and take, and I think that's the key message.
Nice. No, thank you for that. I think that's a really, really important point. Reaching out is always, it's like I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
That's why we've got a lot of members in the community, because we reach out to the right people to join that community. So how do you maintain balance between innovation and practicality when putting in new features into the product?
Yeah, so just to explain our product, it's this beautiful wall mirror that you put up in your home. I'm trying to find a mirror here, but I don't think there is one. But is there one
There's
there?
one just there.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that horizontal one, but it's actually vertical in. So it's the sort of thing you might put up in your home, perhaps in your living room or your kitchen or your wardrobe. When it's off, it just looks like exactly just like a mirror, no different to that. But it has a button on it. When you turn the button on, it turns into essentially what we describe as an AI personal trainer. So you'll have a hologram that appears of an actual athlete or a personal trainer. and they will guide you through a series of workouts, programs, classes. Where things get really freaky is there's a camera embedded in the mirror which is hidden. So as you're following that trainer, you actually get live feedback into your form. They correct you when you're doing it wrong. They count your reps. They recommend your weights, when to increase or decrease. They give you a score based upon how well you're doing and how good your form is. So all of the things that typically were done by a human and you'd have to pay, as I said, up to 50 to 100 pounds an hour for, we've automated that using AI and hardware. So you get all of those cool feedback on screen, on the mirror. It will actually pop up saying, if you're doing a squat, it will say, oh, go lower, or your feet are too wide, and then it will count the reps. And if you're not doing it right, it won't count it, and it will tell you all the right things to do and obviously log your progress over time. So that's our product. So I answered the question that I wanted to answer, but I didn't actually answer yours. Yeah.
Innovation and practicality with new features.
So like we have a very small team. We're actually only 6 people still, which most people are quite surprised. We've kept things very, very lean. I think the good thing with a product like us, especially because it's consumer and we have a community of people that use it, is the best place to find out what practical innovation you need to do in the product is just to ask the community, ask your customers. I guess something a lot of brands don't do probably enough of is just to sort of call them up or shoot them an email or set up a Facebook group and just ask them, what do you want to see next? What do you, you know, what is it that this is missing? Because ultimately, if you're building for them, they're the end users, they're the people who this whole thing is for. The key thing is making sure that you can get that, making sure there's an open communication with users. There is a methodology to product management and taking product feedback, like how you interview people about their experience, and that's what my co-founder Sunil is very good at, is being a product manager. So yeah, go to your users. That's the key takeaway there.
Just kind of go into the team. How important is key players in the team, and how much do you give in terms of recruitment? Do you go through a long process, or is it people you know? What does that look like?
Recruitment was really hard, actually, and I think people think that because you've raised some money, therefore you will therefore pay a salary. People will just come running and be happy to work for you, even if you give them a job offer. But actually, I think today's generation, millennials, Gen Z, they have many options on the table, right? They and they don't necessarily stick in the same job in the same way how perhaps people were 20 years ago. Yeah. So the key thing is to communicate, obviously, a very, very strong culture, to make sure that the interview process communicates that culture as well, and that it's very transparent, it's fun, you actually show off your personality. The one thing that we've learned internally for what really works for us is we give people, so we've made a mistake before when we hired, which is we brought people on, went through this whole hiring process, they signed it on and they came into the company, and we even gave equity share options and things like that. And then 3 months in, we realized actually they're not that good at what they do, and what they said on their CV or in their cover letter isn't actually what they're good at doing. And by that point, it's sort of too late. You've sort of wasted all that time. So what we do now is for the final sort of stage, we actually give, in the recruitment process, we give everyone a test. So if you're, I don't know, if we're hiring you to do and become an engineer, then we'll actually give you a short coding test where we ask you to build a certain feature in the product. We're happy, what we do, we pay people, so we pay them for like half a day or a day to come into the office and do that test, so we're not taking any time or free labor. But it's worth paying just that half day or whatever 1 day cost it might be, rather than making the fatal mistake of bringing them into the company, and then it's a much more messier process. So that's something that's worked tremendously well for us, and we've managed to whittle down like a recruitment process of like 100 people down to 3 just by doing stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And what's the next steps? What's the next 12 months look like for Magic?
So we closed 2 years ago, but we only announced it last year in the press. We closed a round of funding, which was $2.5 million. We had 2 VCs that led it, and the rest were all angels. Traction's been very good. So we launched publicly in like July last year. So for the next 12 months, I think we're probably going to kick off another fundraise process. We want to build our technology, our AI. We've got about 300 different exercises that track people. We want to scale that to 3,000. So we want to bring on more athletes and more content creators on our platform. And potentially we may go international as well, depending on how things go. So that's really where things are looking. But yeah, we want to grow the team, grow the technology, and naturally it sort of lends itself to a sort of fundraise process.
Nice. And what keeps you motivated? because doing the fundraiser again for the second time,
Yeah.
it must be so.
It's it's very demanding. In fact, that's why I have to head off straight after this, because we've got a whole bunch of emails and whatever I need to get on to ahead of tomorrow. It takes its toll on you. And I think what's really important is having a very strong support network. For me, like at home, I have my wife who, it helps so much. She's basically the rock who, it's someone who's not in the business who I can complain to, because I can't really complain that much in front of all the team. But the other really important thing is having a co-founder. I know a lot of people try to do the solo founder thing, and obviously if that's what works for you, then that's great. I really think it's important to try and find a co-founder, even if you have to give away, half of the business, and it's like a 50-50 share to start off with. It's so worth it, because on the days when things get too much, the workload's too stressful, you're going through very, very stressful processes like fundraising, having someone to lean on and confide in who's also in the business and vested in the success, it pays off so much. And I highly recommend it if you can find one. But by the way, if you can't find one, I also don't think it's the biggest thing in the world, because when you look at like the top 10 reasons why startups fail, right? It's not even competition or lack of demand. The number one reason startups fail is co-founder dropout or co-founder fallouts. So I would also caveat, like, find a co-founder, but also caveat that if you can't find one, don't think it's like the end of the world, because there's plenty of examples and plenty of reasons why being a solo founder can also work very well. So there you go.
Awesome. And also TED Talks. Tell me a little bit about that. How did you feel when you were, when it first started and you were about to do a TED Talk? And
yeah,
it was really exciting times, right?
Yeah, I spoke at TED in October, which was incredible. Very, very nerve-wracking speaking up there. I think, incredible experience. I think it's one of those bucket list type things. But I think I say this about not just TED, but also like any other milestone in life is often you sort of chase these things, and then when you achieve them, you often think, oh well, is that it? Okay, that was great, but now I want to achieve the next thing. And I think I think sometimes these things are very kind of you kind of sometimes just need to take a step back and just be grateful for all the things that have happened previously, and not be constantly feeling like you're on a treadmill chasing the next thing. So TED was fantastic, and it was great to speak there, but it's the sort of thing where I don't think it's important to let those things necessarily define you, and I would have been just as happy not doing it. So there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Some advice for aspiring entrepreneurs.
You've got to develop thick skin. That's something that I didn't have at the beginning, because you're going to hear no's a lot. If you don't hear them from investors, you're going to hear them from customers. If you don't hear them from customers, you're going to hear it from employees. If you don't hear employees, it'll be like some sort of partners or partnerships you're trying to forge. You're going to hear no's a lot of the time. The good news is that it's only the yeses that people ever hear about, and that you end up bragging about on LinkedIn and social media and the rest of it. But I was very thin-skinned throughout my, I never realized how resilient you need to be. So you have to really develop a thick skin, know that no is never going to be, final. There are going to be yeses out there, and you just have to keep pursuing and keep working on it.
What does failure mean to you?
So it kind of is like what I was just saying, which is like, I think I was trying to remember the quote, but it was something like, success is never final and failure is never fatal. I think that's the quote, which basically means if you're successful, that's great, but it may not be that way forever. Yeah. But equally, if you fail, that's obviously awful, but also remember that's not going to be there forever either. So I think just taking that step back and having that humility is really important.
I always say failure is my best friend. Until I don't fail enough times, right, I'm not going to get to where I want to be. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for that, Varun. I think there's quite a few people here that want to ask questions.
Sure, yeah.
Should we open it to the audience to ask questions? And
yeah, I've got a question. That's fine.
Sure.
So, there's a lot of skepticism about AI. How do you sort of battle through that and produce your product?
What type of skepticism do you?
So there's a lot of skepticism about the AI is going to produce wrong answers, or it's sort of it's strained away from humanity, and it's unethical, or those sort of arguments.
We get a lot of people who comment on our Facebook ads and Instagram ads saying you're trying to put personal trainers out of business and you're replacing. But remember, if you think about the last 100 years or even perhaps even the last 500 years, whatever people used to do was always replaced by something new, right? So in the past, everyone used to use their hands to do something. And then suddenly you had like the Industrial Revolution when people started using tools and machinery. And then in the last 50 years, all of that's now been replaced by computers that tend to just automate a lot of those things. And now I guess a lot of people are talking about AI basically replacing your basic computing, because you can basically now do computing processes 10 times, 100 times faster. So in 50 years' time, we'll probably look back and think this was just a natural evolution of how things were meant to be. The key thing is like, how do you kind of ride that wave and capitalize on it? I suppose you can sit there and try and resist it as much as you want and sort of cry that this has happened, but the fact is these things are probably going to be inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, so where do you see this magic AI in 5 years' time? What is your sort of envision? How do you envision magic AI in 5 years?
So if it was an investor, I'd say, well, we're going to exit somehow in 5 years. But the truth is that I'm more than happy to work on this business really for the rest of my life, because it's so much fun. I feel like we're making a difference and making people healthier. I think ideally we'd be way beyond the UK in 5 years and in multiple countries around the world. Ideally, I think we probably could go all the way to a major exit, like such as a IPO or something. But we're sort of taking each year as it comes, I suppose. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to be holding a virtual microphone.
Okay.
And he was first.
No, wasn't he?
No,
I think he was.
Oh, were you first? I'm sorry.
No, you go first. No, you go
But he
first.
kept going.
I've got a very curious question, but I'm quite a curious person. What's the marketing strategy for Unhoused? Like, how do you get homeless people to know you even exist?
So we don't sell anything to. So the people that use our website are just ordinary people who are looking to buy stuff for themselves, a bit like going on Amazon or ASOS, and then we go to a shelter and we'll donate an item. Yeah. Yeah. We didn't think many homeless people would be logging on. Yeah.
And can I just follow up with what the marketing strategy for Magic AI is in terms of how you're getting your message across and how you're positioning it?
So we rely on performance marketing, so Instagram, Facebook, Google Ads. We spend, I think last month we spent 100,000 just on that. We see like a 4x return at the moment. So for every pound we spend, we see 4x back in revenue. So we've got that to a fine tee where we totally understand the mechanics and the metrics. We know if this is what we put in, this is what's going to come out. And I guess that's the beauty of performance-based marketing, right? I do think in the future we probably will go into TV and radio and etc. But performance marketing is definitely a great place to start and scale, right? We initially started by maybe spending 10K in a month, and then sort of scaled up as we could see what worked and what didn't work.
And
Yeah.
One more quick one. Who's your ideal target audience for Magic AI?
The three main customers we see we tend to get a lot of mums, a lot of people who feel particularly intimidated going into a gym or can't leave the house for whatever reason, even if you're working from home a lot. Second are obviously professionals, so people who are perhaps slightly cash rich, time poor. Again, they may be working from home 2 or 3 days a week, plus the weekend. It's like 4 or 5 out of 7 days they're at home, so they value that flexibility, that on-demandness. And the final group we see a lot are like these sort of health tech aficionados, so people who love their Whoop and Aura, quantified health data is the new trend, so people who love that type of stuff.
Very interesting, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. So you entered the tech industry quite later than, like, because nowadays there's kids like coding at the age of 8.
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, do you see yourself more as like a generalist who's like very good at a bunch of things, but not necessarily just like really like the greatest at one thing? That's why you're like the visionary who leads the team.
Yeah, I think someone gave me that advice actually when I was younger, which is, you should become really, really good at one thing. And I think if you want to be like a superstar engineer, then obviously that's the way to go. I think when you're an entrepreneur, you have to wear different hats. So even if you could code so unbelievably well, there's a high chance that's not what you're going to spend your time doing anyway. So it's actually better to be pretty good at a lot of things rather than exceptionally good at one thing. That's just my personal view. And also remember, once your business gets off the ground, you're going to hire experts. You're going to hire the best, do actually know that, have that deep expertise for those individual tasks.
Christian?
Hi, Varun. Hi.
Hey.
Really nice talk. I just had a few questions. So, like, I'm currently in the same stage that you were on earlier on. Like when you were doing your masters and you started working part time, you're working as an intern and like going through it. Like I'm literally in the exact same stage.
Yep.
What advice do you have for me? Like if I plan to develop my career with startups in the future?
So the one thing is you want to, like, I don't know if you want to start your own thing or if you want to work in a startup, but this was, okay, that's great. So what I did was, so when I was trying to start in the world of startups and learn, I knew that my end goal was I wanted to start a startup. So I went to apply for a job actually at a company at the time, a young growing startup. And I went to the job interview and actually I didn't get the job, but because I had no skills really. I was basically a similar age to you. I had just come out of university. I'd studied something completely irrelevant, which was law. And so but he gave me amazing advice. He said two things. He goes, if you want to start a startup, there's two ways to do it. One is you go and work for a startup first. The learning curve will not be very steep, but you'll get to make lots of mistakes on someone else's dime, right? And then eventually you'll be able to leave and then do your own thing. The second route is just to start the startup. The learning curve will be very steep, but you would have actually started something and you actually be basically doing your dream, but you're learning as you go along. And that's it. There's no other way around it. If you want to get into it, those are the two routes. There's no other thing I can... Don't go and work for Facebook or Google or what. You're not going to learn anything that's probably practical on a day-to-day basis for a startup in those types of companies. And indeed, a corporate, probably not either, even though when you go to those interviews, they say things to you like, "Oh, we have a very entrepreneurial environment and very entrepreneur." No. It's never the case. So,
For transparency, Christian is currently interning with one club.
okay, yes, but that's exactly the best environment, right?
He obviously can't say.
Yeah, well, that's the best environment. Yeah.
Definitely the best.
Maybe another, like just one more question. So, like, how did you find your inspiration to start something? Like you told about that, over the period you were more focused on your fitness journey and you started it. But like how getting into AI and developing the product, like how do you come to that inspiration?
So one way is by looking at other markets and seeing what's working and not working, because I think a lot of the startups in this country that have done well have probably taken ideas or at least modeled on various, at least business models that have worked in different verticals before. Like my first startup I worked in was called Hubble. There was an Airbnb for office space, and they wouldn't have had the idea if Airbnb didn't exist first. So it's like taking one model that's already worked perhaps in a certain industry and then applying it to a different. That's actually the best way, right? There's a lot of validation there.
Can I just point out, Christian, that were you not doing an internship with one club, you would not be here asking for questions.
Are you selling internship?
No, just to it, Christian. If you have a question.
Thank you very much for your talk. I was wondering, so you started, you had the AI personal trainer idea before AI became mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And, but before that you studied law, so I'm guessing, I'm assuming that you weren't that integrated into tech beforehand.
Uh-huh.
So how did you have this idea of creating an AI personal trainer before it was well known?
Oh, so I was working in a tech company for like 6 years it was called Hubble. So at that company, and it's also why I say it's great to work in a startup, you actually do have an entrepreneurial environment where you learn about all the trends that are going on, all the new products and tools that businesses are using. So you're really on the front line of innovation when you're in a fast-growing young startup. So over those years, I started learning about these types of technologies and also how you can apply them to different industries. So if I hadn't have been in that working environment for 6 years before, I don't think I would have ever come up with something like this, because you're right, I was completely non-technical.
a fellow marketer. I'm spending around 40 to 50k a month. But the 4 ROAS is like insane. So I had a question about your product cost, mainly on the technical side. Like, how much is it? Like, what's your break-even ROAS? Like, you must be operating at quite a high break-even ROAS to be like pushing for a 4 ROAS, or you're like insanely profitable then, right?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting because I know CPMs in the UK are a lot cheaper.
That's true.
They're a lot it's a lot cheaper here, but yeah, I'm kind of interested about more of the like the cost of goods and stuff like that. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I know this is being recorded, so I've got to be careful what I say. But it is profitable on that first transaction. I think that's the key thing. Yeah, the right way to go about it is you work out what the break-even ROAS is, and then you try and hit whatever you need to on top of that. And yeah, we're a fair bit on top of that, which is great.
Yeah, and how is that ran? Do you use? I'm assuming you don't use an agency.
We have done before. Yeah, some brands love working with an agency. Some brands love working with a freelancer. Some people just hire in-house, I think, and we've actually done all 3 over the last 2 years, and it's a personal preference, right? What you prefer.
And your ads, your product seems quite complex. So, normally I would think are you mainly doing retargeting for people who have already come on the website? But then that's quite a lot of money just for retargeting.
Yeah.
So you're also doing like long-form video ads.
Yeah, exactly, because our product is a higher consideration purchase, meaning people don't necessarily buy it the first time they see it. They have to come back to the site, they think about it, maybe they go so we're stocked just up here in Selfridges, so you can go in there and do a demo on the device. So it has, you're right, it has a longer consideration period, and retargeting is very good for that. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks for the talk. Well, one question really, but your market that you're in is pretty complicated, so you're B2C as well as hardware. So if you hadn't had the exit with Hubble, do you reckon you would have gone into this type of business, or would you chosen something else?
I went into this business really just because I was inspired by my own personal kind of troubles and experiences. It was really because it was something I was personally interested in. I also did study the business model to make sure it was something that could work and could ultimately bring back strong returns. So I guess it was like, yeah, if you think about like a Venn diagram, it was what's my personal interest and what do I think is the most compelling business model, and this is really what it landed on. There's lots of reasons why I also think going into hardware, by the way, is a very good idea. A lot of investors sort of don't like it, but I also think that because so few people go into it, it's also very, very defensible, and not many people want to compete with you because of how complex it can be. So in some respects, if you can get over that initial complexity with building a physical hardware product, then you know the world's your oyster from that point, in my view.
How do you actually do that? So how would you recommend, like any of us in here who probably have the capital to do that, how would you recommend getting started with a hardware product?
So a lot of people will say to you, go to like a fancy design agency in London that will design like a really slick CAD and 3D rendering of a product, and then you try and find a manufacturer somewhere to make it for you. And what I realized is the key is to do the reverse. So because the reason why that doesn't work is because you'll get some fancy design agency to build, sketch something out for you and say, oh, you've got this feature and that feature, and then you try and find a manufacturer to make it, and the manufacturer will be like, oh no, this isn't going to work because this is like this and that's like that, and this material will make it way too expensive for you, and actually this is not really commercial. And so most projects end up dying at that phase. In fact, that's the reason why a lot of Kickstarters didn't actually work, is because they sort of were able to create this like slick looking video, but then they never could find the manufacturer to really do it. So the key is to start with the manufacturer. So if let's say you want to start a new sneakers brand, which has a really slick, innovative material, whatever it might be, go to a factory, try and find a factory that already makes trainers, that already understands about material, about laces, they're already making it for other brands. And then once you've sort of ordered some of their samples, you've got to know how they are, then send them your design and say, look, are you capable of producing this? And even if they'll say no, they'll at least tell you why not. And that advice will then push you to the next iteration and whatever. So there is a bit of a product development kind of cycle you have to go through. But the key thing is always try and find someone who can make it from the beginning.
USPs possible.
Yeah, make sure it's exactly, yeah.
We've got time for just 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah.
Great session and great having you here. So my question is about how you secure the investments in the beginning that you were looking for. As you mentioned, it's important to build that rapport to be able to pitch your ideas to investors and get their ideas on that as well. However, analytical-wise and the numberings that you included, you mentioned that it's important to have that few customers that you can represent that there is demand there. What are the other important things that you would say really made that impact for them to focus on your project based on the numberings and data that you included in the beginning without having that actual numbers?
So the key thing is, especially if you're launching like a physical product, even if it's something in food and drink or it's some cool thing you've developed, is try and get some pre-orders to validate that people actually want this. There's nothing more compelling than when you've actually managed to get, even if it's just 10 or 50, or if you could get like 100, to just put some money down to say that they want this product. So what we did is we built a very simple landing page. We used like a tool like squarespace.com or shopify.com if you're familiar with those. And they already have templates set up. So we just built a very simple template. We said, this is our product. We actually did do those product renderings and made it look like it was something very official. And we ran some very basic, cheap ads to that page. And I think we managed to get about 50 sign-ups or 50 people. And we only charged them £99. We said, pay £99 as a pre-order. We'll ship it to you at the end of the year. And we managed to convince about 50 odd people to do that. And that was enough for investors to think, well, you know, if they could do 50 in 1 month, maybe they could do more. And that was enough validation to say, okay, people actually want to buy this thing.
So I understand that you made them to fill in their forms and like actually get that commitment from them, and you were charging them £99 to deliver the product after when it's ready.
When it's ready.
However, how you include the cost of the product, I think it's going to be more than that £99.
Yeah, that was just a deposit.
Okay.
We said it's a fully refundable deposit, and yeah, that's basically how we did it. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Hugo.
Hi, Varun. I'm a software engineer. I'm also quite interested in building an app in this industry. I wanted to ask you about the vision of Magic AI and where it could go in the future. I was wondering, for example, if you've ever considered or explored solutions around like more B2B avenues, such as partnering with gyms to have rooms, for example, that have your product in, or to work with more high-performance teams or athletes to help them analyze or monitor their teams, their athletes, and things like that, or if not that, and anything that's...
Yeah, for us, we will be working more with like hotels, spas, members clubs, co-working spaces, hotels. So we've had a lot of demand from them, and I guess it's something we want to focus on over the next 12 months. Where I think there's probably going to be big opportunities licensing perhaps our technology to other businesses, physiotherapy, rehab, something like that. Quite an early stage for that at the moment.
That was a bit like your email to your founder then, asking questions. You just had to be the customer first, and then you're following his advice. We've just got time for one more question, so if someone's got a really good question, or even just a decent question. Oh, you've had one, go for it.
So, if you could give us one piece of advice out of all your experiences and just in life in general, since you've had so many, what would that be?
Oh, that's a hard one. I'll say lean into your curiosity. So often you sometimes find the best ideas in places that you didn't initially think you'd find them. And for me, I never thought I'd go into a health, fitness type of business ever. I never thought I would do that. But because I went through my own personal story, I realized that was something I was interested in. Started really leaning into that because I was just curious that there must be something here. Like, this is something really interesting for me. I love doing this. Ended up starting a business in the space, and the business has taken off. So key bit of advice is that if you have an inkling that there's something that you're probably interested in, that there's probably is something there, and you should try and see it all the way through. Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Varun. Can we give him a round of applause, please? That was awesome.